The moment my daughter-in-law threw a fistful of mashed potatoes across my dining room table and screamed, "You selfish old man, you don't deserve this family," I did not yell back. I did not stand up. I just looked at her, then at my son sitting right beside her, and he said nothing. Not a single word. I picked up my napkin, wiped the gravy off my sleeve, and smiled, because that was the moment I had been waiting for. Let me back up. My name is not important. What matters is this. I am 67 years old. I built a plumbing supply business from a secondhand truck and a storage unit in Dayton, Ohio. I worked 6 days a week for 31 years. I buried my wife, Carol, 4 years ago last March. I raised 2 sons mostly on my own after she got sick, and I never once asked either of them for anything. My older son, Daniel, is 41. He married a woman named Kristen 8 years ago. I will be honest, I tried to love Kristen. I brought her flowers the first Christmas. I offered to help them with a down payment on their house. I showed up at every birthday, every barbecue, every school play for their 2 kids. But Kristen was the kind of woman who kept a running tally of everything she felt she was owed, and in her mind, she was always behind. My younger son, Patrick, lives in Portland. He stayed out of most of this. That matters later. For the past 2 years, Kristen had been dropping hints that her parents, Roy and Diane, who lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Clarksburg, should move in with us. Not with her and Daniel, with me. Into the house I had owned for 22 years. The house Carol picked out. The house where my grandchildren took their first steps. "Dad, the house is too big for one person," Daniel said to me one Sunday in September, 3 months before that Christmas dinner. "I manage fine," I said. "Roy's back has been getting worse. Diane can barely drive anymore. They need support. That's something you and Kristen need to figure out," I said. "They're welcome to visit any time, but they are not moving into my house." Daniel looked at his plate. He had the same look he used to get at 16 when I told him he couldn't borrow the car. Only back then, I believed it was just frustration. This time, something in his eyes was different, calculated almost. 3 weeks later, my accountant called me. His name is Gerald. He has done my books for 18 years, and he is not a man who calls unless something is wrong. "I need you to come in," he said. "There are some irregularities I think you should see in person." I went in the next morning. Gerald spread 4 documents across his desk and folded his hands. 2 of them were refinancing applications on my house and on a vacant commercial lot I had owned on the east side of town. Both had been submitted 2 months earlier. Both bore something that looked like my signature. I had not signed either of them. I sat very still for a long time. "Who filed these?" I asked. "That's what I don't know yet," Gerald said. "But someone accessed your personal information. Social Security, property records, your mortgage account number. Someone who knew exactly what they were looking for." I asked him to pull my credit report. We found 3 new accounts. I had never opened a home equity line, a personal loan application, and a credit card with a $15,000 limit that had already been maxed out at a jewelry store and 2 furniture retailers in Cincinnati. I drove home. I sat in Carol's chair in the living room for a long time. I looked at her photo on the mantel, the one from our trip to the Smoky Mountains, her laughing at something I had said, her hair blowing sideways in the wind. I picked up my phone and called my younger son, Patrick. "I need you to fly in for Christmas," I said. "Dad, is everything okay?" "Not entirely," I said, "but it will be. I just need you here." Then I called my attorney. His name is Warren. He is 70 years old, semi-retired, and the most methodical man I have ever known. I told him everything. He was quiet for a moment and then said, "Do not confront anyone. Do not change your behavior in any way. Let me make some calls." What Warren found over the next 6 weeks I will not describe all at once, because I want you to understand how each piece landed for me like a stone dropped into still water, the ripples spreading further than I expected every time. The credit card, opened using my Social Security number and a copy of my driver's license. The billing address had been changed to a P.O. box in Westchester. The furniture purchases, a sectional sofa, a bedroom set, a dining room table, all delivered to Roy and Diane's apartment in Clarksburg. The refinancing applications, submitted by a mortgage broker in Fairborn. When Warren's contact at the county recorder's office pulled the broker's client file, the contact information listed was Daniel's cell phone number. The personal loan application, still pending, for $40,000. Listed purpose, home renovation. There was no renovation. There was no home. There was just my son and his wife and her parents, and a plan they had been building quietly for over a year. I kept going to Sunday dinners. I kept helping my grandchildren with their homework in the living room while Kristen stood in the kitchen pretending to be busy. I kept nodding when Daniel talked about Roy's back and how hard things were. I said very little. I watched. 2 weeks before Christmas, Patrick flew in from Portland. I met him at the airport, and we sat in the parking garage for 45 minutes while I told him everything. He didn't say much. He is like Carol that way. He processes quietly, and then he acts. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "Just be there," I said. "That's all." Christmas dinner was at my house. It was always at my house. Carol had started that tradition in 1987, and I had kept it every year since she died. I cooked the ham myself. I made her cornbread stuffing from the recipe card she wrote out in her handwriting that I keep in a plastic sleeve in the kitchen drawer. Daniel and Kristen arrived at 4. Roy and Diane came with them, which they had not done before. Roy with his cane, Diane carrying a store-bought pie like a peace offering. My grandchildren ran in ahead of everyone, and I held them in the doorway for a moment. The way you hold on to something when you know a storm is coming. Dinner was tense from the beginning. I could feel it, the way you feel weather changing something. In the pressure of the room. In the way Daniel kept glancing at Kristen. In the way Kristen kept glancing at her father. We made it through the soup and most of the main course. Then Roy set down his fork and said, "Richard, we need to talk about the arrangement." I looked at him. "What arrangement is that, Roy?" Kristen jumped in before he could answer. "Dad, we've been patient about this. Diane and Roy cannot stay in that apartment. It's not safe anymore. The sensible thing, the family thing, is for them to move into the guest rooms here while we figure out a longer-term plan." "I've already told Daniel my answer on that," I said. "Your answer was selfish," Kristen said. Her voice had an edge to it now, something rehearsed and sharp. "You're sitting in this big house all by yourself, and you won't share it with people who need help. What would Carol think?" That was the wrong thing to say. I put my fork down slowly. Patrick looked at his plate. "Kristen," I said, "I would appreciate it if you left Carol out of this conversation." "I'm just saying what everyone is thinking," she said. "I don't believe that's true," I said. "Dad," Daniel's voice now, flat, impatient. "Just say yes. We've been asking for months. It's one thing, and you keep making it into some big stand. It's embarrassing." "I'm embarrassed?" I said. That was when Kristen stood up. I don't think she planned to throw anything. I think she had planned a harder argument, a more controlled confrontation, and the calm way I was speaking had unraveled it. She grabbed the serving bowl of mashed potatoes, Carol's good ceramic bowl from our wedding registry, and she hurled it, not quite at me, past me. It hit the wall beside my chair and shattered. The room went completely silent. My grandchildren were staring. Diane had her hand over her mouth. Roy looked at the floor. Daniel said nothing. I looked at the shards of Carol's bowl on my floor. I looked at the smear of potatoes on the wall. Then I looked at my son. "Are you going to say something?" I asked him. He looked away. I stood up from the table. I walked to the kitchen counter where my phone was sitting, and I made a call. Warren picked up on the second ring. "They're here," I said. "Give me 40 minutes, he said. I walked back to the table and sat down. Nobody moved. Kristen had sat back down. Her face was red. Roy had started to say something to her in a low voice, and she shook her head. "Dad," Daniel started. "Let's just sit quietly until our guests arrive," I said. "What guests?" he said. "What are you talking about?" "Warren is coming," I said. "And he's bringing a few people with him." Daniel's face shifted. Something behind his eyes moved, like a man who hears the sound of a lock turning from the wrong side of a door. "Why is Warren coming?" "Because I asked him to," I said. "Daniel, do you want to tell me about the mortgage applications?" The color left his face so quickly. It was like watching a light switch off. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "That's all right," I said. "Warren will explain it." Kristen looked at Daniel. It was not the look of a wife confused by what her husband might have done. It was the look of a partner calculating how much the other person was going to say. "Daniel," she said quietly. "Stop," he said. "Daniel, how much does he—" "Kristen," I said, "stop." Roy had figured it out by then. He was looking at his son-in-law with an expression I had not seen on his face before, not guilt. Exactly. More like a man realizing the ground beneath him is less solid than he thought. I went and poured myself a glass of water and stood at the kitchen window for a while, looking out at the backyard. Carol had planted a dogwood tree out there the year we moved in. It was bare now, just branches against the December sky. But in the spring, it was the first thing that bloomed. Warren arrived at 6:42. He came with his associate, a sharp young woman named Claire, who carried a leather folder, and two detectives from the Montgomery County Economic Crimes Unit, a man named Holt, and a woman named Reyes, who had been working the case for the past 3 weeks. I let them in and walked them to the dining room. Daniel stood up when he saw the detectives. "Dad, what did you do?" he said. His voice cracked on the last word. He sounded, for a moment, like he was 16 again, not the calculated version I had been watching all evening, but the boy who used to come downstairs at midnight to tell me about things he was afraid of. It almost broke me. I want to be honest about that. It almost did. "I didn't do anything, Daniel," I said. "That's the difference between us." Detective Holt asked everyone to sit down and explained, in a very measured voice, that there was an active investigation into fraudulent use of my financial identity, that certain documents had been filed using forged signatures, and that they had probable cause connecting those actions to Daniel and to a mortgage broker in Fairborn who had already agreed to cooperate with the county prosecutor's office. Kristen's attorney, the one she called approximately 45 seconds after Holt finished speaking, arrived an hour later. By then, Kristen had stopped talking entirely. Roy and Diane had been driven home by Patrick, who said nothing to them except, "I'll call you a ride." Daniel was detained that night for questioning. He was not formally charged until 3 weeks later, but the charges when they came were serious identity theft, forgery of financial documents, wire fraud. The mortgage broker pled to a lesser charge and testified. The $15,000 credit card balance was recovered through a civil judgment against Kristen's estate. The refinancing applications were voided. He called me from his attorney's office the day before the arraignment. I answered. "Dad," he said, "I need you to understand that I was doing this for my family, for my kids. Your kids were at my dinner table when your wife threw their great-grandmother's bowl against the wall," I said. "That's what you did for them." He was quiet. "I love you," I said. "That has not changed, and it will not change. But love is not the same thing as permission. It never was." I hung up. Patrick stayed for 2 more weeks. We painted the guest room, the one that had been used as storage since Carol died. We cleared out boxes and found some of her things, a quilt she had been working on, some books with her notes in the margins, a shoebox of photographs from before the boys were born. We sat on the floor of that room for a long time going through the photos. Patrick found one of me and Carol at a county fair somewhere in 1981, me holding a stuffed elephant I had won at a ring toss, looking so young I barely recognized myself. "You were pretty cool back then," Patrick said. "I was always cool," I said. He laughed. It was the first time I had heard real laughter in that house in months. The guest room is still empty. I am not ready to have anyone in it yet. But I painted it a color Carol would have liked, a soft blue-gray, like the sky just before it fully lightens in the morning. I still cook Sunday dinner. I set 2 places now, one for me and one out of habit. And sometimes I leave Carol's chair pulled out a little the way she always left it. My grandchildren still come over. Their mother brings them, waits in the car. It is uncomfortable and probably always will be. But those kids did nothing wrong, and they are not going to lose their grandfather on top of everything else. I learned something through all of this that I want to say plainly, because I think some of you know what it feels like to sit at a table where someone is pretending to love you while quietly taking from you. Being old does not mean being easy. Being a father does not mean being a resource. Being family does not mean you forfeit the right to protect yourself, your home, or the memory of the person you spent your life building something with. I am 67 years old. I built a business from a second-hand truck. I raised 2 sons. I loved one woman for 38 years, and I am still here.